morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our virtual Walk with the Future Doc. So my name is Lauren, and I am a fourth-year medical student at WVU. And so I'm just going to go over kind of like what to expect over the next hour as we walk together virtually. And thanks for everyone joining us in this cold weather too, even though I know a lot of you are inside, but I know Mia's outside, Dr. Lorenzetti's outside, and I'll be heading out in a couple minutes too. So today we have Dr. Lorenzetti leading the conversation for our first walk of 2022 on the topic of I made up my mind to become healthier, now what? And then as we walk together virtually, we'll open the conversation for any questions or discussion about the topic. Everyone should have received like a little pop-up notification on Zoom, and that's to consent to the recording of this Zoom call. And only the audio portion is what gets made available publicly on our YouTube channel, which is WVU Walk with the Future Doc. And a lot of our past walks are also up on our YouTube channel. So if you wanted to pull one of those up and go for a walk on your own on a day that we're not having a walk, that could be a good idea to listen to it as well. And our Facebook page is WVU Walk with the Future Doc too. And this is the best place to look for updates about all of our future walks. So now I will introduce everyone to Dr. Lorenzetti. We're really excited to have her leading our first walk of 2022 about how I've made up my mind to become healthier, now what? And so she is actually the director of the Culinary and Lifestyle Medicine track at WVU School of Medicine. And she is a certified culinary medicine specialist. So we're lucky to have her joining us and excited to hear what she has to say. So I will let you start, and I'm about to head out into the cold too.
Okay. Well, I was thinking, obviously, since this is the first walk of 2022, and we're so close to New Year's, that a good topic would be about New Year's resolutions. A lot of people make New Year's resolutions, but it's been quoted about 80% of those people will give up on their resolution before the end of January, and about 10% will make it 6 months. So we have our New Year's resolution, which is I want to become healthier. How do we make that happen? So why do we make resolutions at the beginning of a new year? Any temporal marker, like the first of the month, the birthday, the start of a new week, always gives us that chance to leave the old you behind and make room for the new you. One adage I like to tell patients is if you do what you've always done, you will get what you've always gotten. So simple, right? So you can't expect a different outcome if nothing changed. Something has to change. And once we make our mind up to make a change, we have to think about why we want that change. How will I feel if I make that change? Will I be less tired and have more energy if I lost some weight to play with my grandchildren? Probably so. In the science of motivational interviewing, we start calling that a SMART goal. Getting healthier is an aspiration, but a SMART goal is how we work towards that aspiration, one step at a time. The brain needs evidence of success if you want your new behavior to become a habit. And a lot of science has said it takes about 3 months to create a new habit. You have to give yourself some evidence that this new behavior can actually happen for you. This is especially true for changes that seem very difficult for you to make. Our brain's primary function is to protect us, and it will work hard to keep us from facing a failure. Your emotional brain works together with your logical brain to make up reasons to allow you to avoid the discomfort of change. Life goes back to normal, even if it's an unhealthy path. So to counteract the brain's love to maintain the status quo, You have to have some frequent experience and the feel good payoff for your personal development work. From the moment you make a choice to change, you must daily recognize both the effort that you've made and the positive effects of your work. We do that by creating these SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relative to you and your goal, and temporary anchored. So I'm going to review all of those quickly here. So first, the goal has to be specific. All too often, I see patients with very lofty goals like, I want to lose 100 pounds. That's what I need to be healthier. That's not very specific enough to achieve. You have to start with a goal that's something that you can actually do. As we said, every small success builds on the next success and keeps us motivated. So, for example, it might be that you recognize that you've been eating ice cream every single night after dinner. And you're thinking to yourself, I probably need to cut out some of those processed food calories if I plan to lose any weight. So your goal, your specific goal might be, I will eat ice cream 3 nights a week. And on the other 4 days, I'll do something else that might be healthier for me, whether it's frozen blueberries with some whipped cream or some yogurt with nuts. You have to state the goal positively. I will do this, rather than negatively, I won't eat dessert most of the nights, because you want to frame that change with a positive aspect, not feeling deprived. Secondly, the goal has to be measurable, because we said that we want to be able to measure progress towards the goal, enjoy reaching the goal, and so that we know when we got there. So again, we have to reap that reward of accomplishing something, and that's what helps keep our positivity. So the goal has to be attainable. Saying something like, I will never eat ice cream again. Well, that's not attainable, and then you're bound to fail with that. But saying something like, I can keep my ice cream to 3 times a week seems much more attainable. Still have to do positive talk to yourself. Know that perfection is not expected. The fourth goal is relevance. Will reducing your intake of processed food, ice cream, get you closer to the goal of possibly being healthier and losing some weight? Of course. Hopefully, you'll be cutting those processed food calories and be eating something better for your health. Lastly, the goal has to be time-based. You have to do this activity for a specific amount of time, like we said, 3 times a week. And we're going to say we're going to do this for 2 weeks. So at the end of that 2 weeks, you can look back and say, 80% of the time I did what I said I was going to do. That makes me feel pretty good. You say, yes, I did it. So what does that do for you? Well, certainly builds that self-confidence, because so many of ourselves and our patients, we tried and failed so many times that their lack of confidence is pretty small. To create long-lasting behavioral change, you have to see early and consistently evidence that you were successful at meeting some goal. And then you also have to sit back and evaluate the experience as positive and look for ways that you can pick yourself up when you fall. My notes are getting all twisted up here. Sometimes we don't get to enjoy accomplishing something because we start berating ourselves for what we didn't do. Our willpower wasn't strong enough, et cetera, and then we back down again. So sometimes you have to look and say, okay, maybe my goal was too large. Maybe it was unrealistic, and maybe it was unattainable. So again, go back to the rules of the SMART goal so that you can have a small achievable goal. Sometimes it's because outside commitments rank higher than our internal commitment to self. This is where you make a list of your obstacles that may have kept you from succeeding consistently, identify what went wrong and what you can do to change it. So we'll go back to the ice cream. My personal husband of 40 some years, 46, eats ice cream honestly every single night. And he always says, "Would you like some ice cream?" And I always say, "Well, yes, I would like some ice cream, but no, I'm not going to have any." So you have to think, is this obstacle logistical? I'm sitting in the room with him and I'm watching him eat ice cream. So the temptation is pretty real. So then maybe logistically, I need to go to another room. And so I don't have to watch him eat ice cream. Or one of the things I found is I don't like cookies and cream. So I always say, buy cookies and cream, because then I won't be tempted to eat it. Secondly, you have to think, is the obstacle more mental? So ice cream is a comfort food for me. And often at the end of the day, I'm tired, sometimes sad, just worn out. And I want the comfort of that ice cream. So then you have to think, well, is there something else I could be doing to make me less sad? Maybe go listen to some new music, or I found this low sugar, high protein hot chocolate that's very comforting, warm, and chocolatey. Or frozen blueberries with whipped cream almost mimics ice cream for me. So you have to imagine how good you'll feel if you can make that one small goal and recognize what's happening. The key is to understand how we are wired in order to design the right incentives or process to help us make better choices. In a recent trial of smoking cessation involving more than 6,000 participants, cash incentives were superior to other more traditional interventions in achieving abstinence. Another area of active research involves the use of technology, games, and social networks. Some fitness apps use cash incentives and peer pressure to achieve compliance with fitness regimens. Members who don't reach their goal must pay others who do reach their goal or donate the money to charity. There is preliminary evidence in the literature that these gamification strategies can work. And learning from this new research will help our patients and ourselves to stick to resolutions. Individuals must exercise self-control to meet a new goal or task. But self-discipline is challenging for many of us. How many people have we said, yeah, doc, I want to do this or that, but I have no willpower? So one study that I read about involved people who wanted to lose weight and eat healthier. So they had two groups. One group that performed a short ritual before eating their meal, and the other group who was told to just be more mindful of what they were eating. Now, a ritual is any rigid, repetitive motion. And what it does is accomplish that delay of gratification and enhances your perception of self-control and can actually improve your self-discipline. So in this particular study, the ritual was in the evening meal to cut all your food into pieces before eating, arrange them symmetrically on the plate, and then touch the top of each bite with your utensil 3 times prior to eating that bite. And then those performing this ritual had twice as much success in reducing calorie counts for the day and reported an improved sense of self-control. What we don't want to do is to berate ourselves for not keeping up to our resolutions. We do know that shame and guilt do not work. And rather than beating ourselves up for not sticking to the goals, let's understand why and learn a little more about ourselves. One study published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology was actually an evaluation of those people who do actually just even make the New Year's resolution. And they found that if they even sat down enough to write down their resolution, they were 10 times more likely to actually change a behavior. because by writing it down and thinking it, they were more, at least in an active stage of change at that moment. Those that actually made their changes said their top strategies were to keep on going despite a lapse in performance. They call this value self-liberation, which is allowing yourself to err, not beat yourself up and pick yourself up again. And secondly, it was stimulus control and temptation avoidance strategies. So in conclusion, there are a couple things that we can do with ourselves and our patients. So one is create a physical and emotional climate and environment to success. So if you cue your setting to encourage good habits, you're more likely to follow through. Hence, one of the handouts today is having a healthy pantry that offers good choices to make it easier to eat well and not succumb to less healthy choices. I tell all my patients when I see them in the metabolic clinic not to start their diet the next day or diet eating program. I always hate to call it a diet, but to go home, look at what's in their pantry, figure out maybe a couple things that need to change and buy them. Taking note of those situations that cause you to eat incorrectly is also helpful. A lot of people are multitasking in the morning, not paying attention, they're in a hurry. What can I grab quickly for breakfast today? Where if they did a little better planning perhaps, or had even a choice like a protein shake that they could grab as they were running out of the house in the morning, would certainly be better than the donut they might eat once they get to work. Number two, remember those SMART goals and make those activities that you're going to do very specific so that they're easy to do. You want to celebrate each positive step. Also, there's some evidence that if you write your victories in a journal so that you can actually see how you progress, that you'll be held more accountable to yourself. Thirdly, make it social and surround yourself with support persons if possible. Just like we're doing today, walking with a friend, can make that exercise more of a reality. Invest in your resolution. So for some people, you have to increase your sphere of accountability. That's why we do know that the more often I see a patient back in clinic, to be honest, the more successful they are. If you're money motivated, prepaid classes would work, or perhaps a new workout outfit, or even gear that might help you stick to your routine. I was shopping at Marshall's and I saw this expensive water bottle and it had this little yellow dog on it and it said Lucky Dog. And of course, my dog's name is Lucky. Lauren's dog's name is Luna. Mine is Lucky. And of course, I had to have this expensive water bottle. But now when I drink from that water bottle, it's helped me drink more water, which has been one of the things that I need to do to be healthier. And lastly, remember to give yourself and your patients a pass sometimes. Sometimes we don't achieve goals because goals become all or nothing. And we have to talk to ourselves as if we were talking to our good friend. Change is a process, and we have to be compassionate with ourselves and forgive ourselves for not sticking to a resolution that particular day. Each morning is a different day, and being forgiving to yourself is not a failure or weakness, but it often allows us the capacity to regroup. So that's what I have prepared. It's time now for others to share what kinds of techniques or tricks or concepts they have found helpful in maintaining their own resolutions and helping others.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. C, for walking with us this morning and starting us off the new year with a really great conversation. My name is Mia, and I'm a third-year medical student at WVU. I have an awesome team working with me too. If you guys scroll through like some of the videos here, you might see Taylor, Michael, Lauren, Meg, Ashley. They are here, and I just kind of wanted to ask them to start off the conversation if they had a New Year's resolution, and maybe if something Dr. C said this morning made you kind of change your New Year's resolution, or made you think like maybe that wasn't a smart goal and I need to change it a little bit so that I can be consistent and really achieve it throughout the new year.
I can go first. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
Taylor.
I was like, I'm on a treadmill, so I don't know if it's like really obnoxious or not. I'm Taylor. I'm a first year. I didn't set hard and fast New Year's resolutions this year, which is pretty like atypical of me because I love setting goals. But like a general one that I had was wanting to sleep more and kind of prioritize my sleep, especially being a med student, because I didn't do that as much as I should have first semester. And I'm kind of like the whole time I was personally thinking of, I left things way too vague. And if I actually want to like prioritize my health and sleep more, I really like the whole time I was thinking I need to set like a bedtime routine, because I think that would help motivate me to like, especially like the rituals of like, if I do this habit, kind of like cut off my screen time and don't like plop straight into bed, like read before. I was trying to plan out ways to like motivate myself to actually like set a decent bedtime schedule. But I need to be more specific and use those SMART rules.
That's a great example, because it could be something as simple as just when you cut off your computer every night for 1 week, I'm going to cut it off at 9 o'clock. And just you do that for a week and it's successful. Then the next week, perhaps you say, now I'm going to make sure I get into bed by 10 o'clock or whatever. So there's small little goals so you can be successful, Taylor.
I can go. This is Meg. I'm a third-year med student. One of my goals was to cut down on the amount of caffeine that I drink. So my goal was to try to drink my usually like 2 cups of coffee in the morning, but be done by lunchtime, like noon. But then yesterday, like on Fridays, I'm going to give myself the opportunity to go and get like an afternoon coffee. So it like gives me something to look forward to, because my friend dropped me off Dunkin' yesterday. So like on Fridays, it's something to look forward to. And then the rest of the week, stick to the plan.
Great.
I can say something too. This is Lauren. So I guess it's kind of related to like New Year's resolutions, but like something kind of unique that my family does is every year we'll pick like a word that we want to work on. And then we'll like check in with each other throughout the year. Like, how do you feel like you're doing with your word? So like this year for my word, I picked strength because I want to try and get stronger. And so I think I could definitely like in going back to like the SMART goals. So like I have my word, but like coming up with a plan, like how am I going to get stronger? Like setting that like specific measurable goal to get there. So it's like, I don't know, it's very similar to like New Year's resolution, but we just kind of like pick a word to focus on. And it helps having like other people holding you accountable as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome, Lauren. I've done a word for the year before. I didn't do one this year, nor did I really make a New Year's resolution. But I love hearing everyone else's ideas, and I think those are really awesome, especially as a med student, like focusing on sleep, and focusing on, like Meg talked about, her caffeine, and just being like at your best game every day is important for med school. But it's hard, of course. Things get in the way. Some days you don't feel well, but focusing on sleep and focusing on nutrition are super important. I also wanted to open it up to any of the physicians that are on the call, or any of the dietitians, if they have any tips, maybe for our med student New Year's resolutions, or tips that they give to some of their patients about making some of these goals for the new year.
I had one question as a physician for patients. when you're working with a patient about goals, sometimes I find that they've never thought about weight loss goals or healthy lifestyle goals in a very specific manner, other than I want to lose 100 pounds or, something like that. Is there any resources that you, Rosie, or anyone else, I know Melody's on the call, Dr. Beth Kane's on the call, are there any resources that you all use that would be helpful to patients if their mind isn't there yet? Because sometimes I can't really get them down to that SMART goal at that first visit, but it'd be nice to give them something to work on in the meantime.
Melody, do you want to go first?
I'm not sure I really have an answer to that yet, so I'll have to think about it for a minute.
So I know if you Google SMART goals, there are all these infographics that you can print out and have in your office to share with the patient. So, because I usually get the broad goal when I bring it up. And that's when I basically just talk and say, no, I want a behavior. I want something specific that you can do. Let's see, can we think of something specific that we can do? And then you look back at like Megan's example of caffeine might be a good one, because that's something very specific, very measurable. She allowed herself a reward. And basically, I think those infographics are nice to hand out, but I think having the patient work through that goal with you, and then I actually write it both in their after visit summary as well as my note. And I say, okay, next time we talk, we're going to talk about this goal and what you found that you were successful at, and what you found was more of a challenge, so we can think about how to negotiate that.
I wondered if anyone had like podcasts or books. Like every so often, if I had somebody, I might recommend, there's one podcast called Weight Loss for Busy Physicians that works on a lot of mind work stuff, but also full of a lot of privilege. So I'm careful about recommending it. But I didn't know if you had any books or something like that, workbooks or.
I'm wondering if you need, this is Beth, I'm wondering if you need to look at more of like the trans-theoretic, behavior change models and motivational interviewing.
Yeah.
Some of the motivational interviewing books would be pretty helpful.
I just think it'd be nice to give something to people to take home, to work on if they wanted to. Because I have a few patients that are really big into working through books. I have one that works through books with friends. But I never have specific recommendations, truthfully.
Well, that's a good idea. Maybe we can look. I had to laugh because on the radio this week, where a DJ gives these like little blurb news announcements. One day this week, he said, hey, the New York Times just came out with an article, and it's talking about these things called SMART goals. I was like, okay, New York Times has picked up SMART goals. That's great. And so you could actually Google that article and hand it out. So, but I don't know of any books, but I'd be happy to think about that.
I think there are some books for cognitive behavioral, like workbooks for weight loss as well.
That would be, I need to look those up.
Yeah, on Amazon. Like, I think I've read one in the past.
Out books too, I know. So I don't know if you have it.
I just remembered one thing. There is one book that I do tell some patients that they might want to get. And it's called David Brown, The New Mood Therapy. And this book's probably 25 years old. It comes with an actual workbook. And a psychologist friend of mine gave it to me. And the book is all about vignettes that have to do with the 10 cognitive distortions and how things need to be reframed in your mind. And I looked on Amazon, and you can still buy it. And you might want to look at that yourself and see if that meets one of the goals that you have. But I remember when she gave me the book, she gave me the workbook too. I don't like that kind of thing personally, but if you say you have somebody that likes to do that, you might want to check that one out.
I think one other thing to think about might be checking our own bias when we're working with patients on SMART goals, because we might not be as broad as we think we are. We might be trying to focus on a specific pillar, like how are you going to change your eating? But they might be more ready to change in a different area, like exercise or stress management or sleep. For example, in our interdisciplinary diabetes clinic, a couple of weeks back, we had a lady who had some major psychological issues around food and was not ready to set any SMART goals in regards to food. So we found an area in exercise where she was a little bit more amenable to setting a SMART goal, and we set it there instead. So I think be aware of your own focus and possibly your own bias when you're working with patients on SMART goals.
Good advice.
Tria, this is Kathy. Some of the training I went through before with another program was some information from BJ Fogg, who is, oh gosh, I can't even remember what exactly he does. He works at Stanford, but they talked about tiny habits and just making sure that goals are really small and that they're achievable. And what I thought was interesting is tying a new goal to something you already do. So often I'll talk to people who need to increase their water intake. I'll say, well, you rinse your mouth out after you brush your teeth, right? And they'll say, well, of course. I say, then take a 4-ounce cup, Dixie cup of water and drink it right then and there, because that'll trigger you to continue that habit. Sorry, I'm out of breath.
There is that book. I haven't read it, but the Atomic Habits. I think I've rented it from the library 2 or 3 times and never read it. Then somebody just put one in the chat, and for some reason, podcasts. See, I have a lot of patients. I don't want to necessarily recommend a book because they're wanting to listen or talk through. So this, we can do hard things with the podcast. So I'll have to check that one out too.
I also just want to put the plug in that a lot of our talks from Walk with the Future Doc are on YouTube. And I think a lot of the topics are really great and educational for patients. And also the purpose of our program is to help motivate people to get out and move with us. So if we could tell more patients about this program and get them to join us on Saturday mornings. I know it's cold and a lot of people don't have access to like indoor gyms and treadmills, but we would love to like walk with them and talk with them. So just something to think about, because we do have this awesome program here.
I guess we need to do a better job of printing out your flyers and posting them in the waiting room.
Well, I think that can be our New Year's resolution too, to get the word out more. We just need to make it into a SMART goal.
Well, I think for me, next time I get one of your Walk of Docs, I'm going to literally print it out and give it to every patient I see in clinic over that first week. That might be an easy enough goal to, because I haven't done that. And that's certainly something I could do.
Yes, that would be awesome and super helpful. And also we tried to reach out this week to a lot of food pantries, because we wanted a part of our conversation today to be a little bit about like restocking a healthy pantry. Right, Dr. C?
That's right. We could talk a little bit about that with the people there, what should be in that pantry.
Yeah,
what they would add to the list.
Absolutely. So we have, if you got our email this week, we kind of sent out some recipes and then also a list for a new healthy pantry for the new year. We're also going to be posting those recipes and handouts on our Facebook page after the walk today, so you can check them out. But I'll kind of let Dr. C take the lead here. And I do have a few questions on some things, maybe some new things I've heard about or seen at the store that I kind of want to ask you about or see if you heard about. But I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Okay. So one of the things I find that most people, that's in precious amount, is time. And so many people want something they can grab and go. So telling them to stock their pantry, to really look for, like, if a granola bar is what they need to grab and go, then they need to be more discerning with what granola bar they get, taking a look at the ingredients of their granola bar, and have some of those maybe little higher protein Nature Valley granola bars in their pantry, for example, to reevaluate some of the foods that they have in there that are pure sugar. Maybe they need to think about that. And one lady told me that over the course of the past couple months, she feels her children have gotten healthier because she has learned to rid her pantry of the pure candy and save that for a special day. It might be some of the basics. Like, I think a lot of people don't think about things like canned chicken, but I know at the beginning of the pandemic, I went out and bought a bunch of canned chicken, chicken broth, and tomatoes in a can. And with that, you can make some great chicken soup. So if you don't have something, you don't want to have time to cook chicken, to take chicken in a can, stir fry it, and I'll give them a little recipe. Stir fry that real quick, make it brown, stick it in the chicken broth. You can stick in either some frozen vegetables and a can of tomatoes, and you can make a soup in 10 minutes if you hadn't had time to make it from scratch. So I try to figure out what it is they eat on a daily basis, look at what could be possibly healthier, and then suggest changes in their pantry to reflect that, depending on whether they need the grab and go, or if they have time to play around with new recipes, because it doesn't do me any good to talk to somebody about recipes with almond flour if they hate to bake and they'll never bake. So that person might be better off with a high protein, low carb bar, for example. Or someone else that likes to experiment, things like eggs are so versatile. We're creating a repository of all of our recipes from the Metabolic Center and finally getting them on the website after nearly 2 years. And we're going to separate them into things like, what do you do with eggs? I'm tired of just scrambling eggs, for example. How you can make a muffin out of an egg. So yeah, those are some of the first things that I would think about.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. C. I also wanted to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question out loud, or you can ask it in the chat and I'll make sure that your question is answered. I want to say that one of the things that I always keep in my pantry is oats, because I can use them in a lot of different ways. So I know that buying granola at the store can get expensive sometimes, and it's also full of like a lot of extra sugars and things that I maybe don't need. So I like to make my own granola. I also like to make oats. You could also use the oats to make like different breads if you wanted to make it into oat flour. So I like to buy things in my pantry that I can use for a lot of different things. So oats and beans. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Dr. C, is I've heard a lot about like bone broth. So I usually just buy chicken broth, but now I've been seeing bone broth a lot more, like bone broth with rice. And I kind of wanted to know what you had any thoughts about that, or if it's healthier, or if any of the dietitians know any more about that.
Well, I suspect the dietitians might know a little more about that than me, but I tell you, I always buy bone broth personally. It's about $1 more per carton at Aldi's. But I do think it probably has more nutrition and not just some like dissolved powder, like more like an instant broth, and more protein. But I actually don't know that for a fact, and that would be something good to look at. But is it worth the extra $1? Depends on your budget, I guess. But that is what I always buy. Does anybody else know any different?
I know one of the benefits of bone broth is you get increased collagen because of the dissolving of the bones. So it ups the protein content a little bit, and then you also get the nutrients that are available inside the marrow of the bones. But the thing about bone broth is, if you do get whole meats or meats with bones in them, it's super simple to make yourself. You keep some of the vegetable tops that maybe you didn't that maybe you would have thrown out instead, throw that in with the carcass, cook it up a little bit until it's a little bit thick, and then when it cools it actually becomes a little bit gelatinous almost. And then you can use it yourself. You can freeze it in small chunks and use it yourself, but it's super simple to make.
Good idea. Good idea, Melody.
Yeah,
think
it's
too,
very easy to make, and there's a slight difference in nutrient content. The other thing that I also recommend to people, if they have it available in the store, is just unsalted stock that they're selling now too, which has no sodium in it as well. But I agree with Melody, so easy to make. If you're already making something else, you can totally do that in very little time.
And honestly, if you want to make your own beef broth, beef bones are super cheap at the market, $2 a pound or less usually. So
Yep.
I used to wonder why one of our students, we all made vegetable soup this one time, vegetable chicken soup, different varieties. And when he brought his in, he used thighs, and all the thighs were cut in half. And he said, "Oh, I grew up that you always cut the bone in half so you can get the goodness out of the bone into your soup." And I was like, "Oh, that is a good idea. Hadn't thought about that." So there probably are some tricks that our parents use that are kind of outdated now, but have some real value to the nutritional content.
think of all the benefit that comes out of that marrow, all the nutrients that get stored in the middle of our bones.
The other thing I think people need guidance on is just a couple of spices. And so if you're eating chicken a lot and you want to make that chicken different, I have a spice handout that I give out. And it sort of says, like Asian spices, Mexican combination, Italian combination. And really, it's the same couple spices for a lot of these with just a little bit of a twinge. So instead of having, 30 spices in their cabinet, something like cumin, coriander, cinnamon, oregano, thyme. I mean, in different combinations, they make a different taste to that chicken. So a lot of people, my patients, haven't really experimented with spices. So I find that's a good thing to talk about when you're talking about their pantry.
I would love for you to share that. That would be great, because a lot of my patients are really afraid to experiment in the kitchen. And I know what I use, but I love to see what everybody else does too.
Yeah, I can send that to Mia and she can post it.
Absolutely.
And for people who are on a budget, it's a little bit more limited at Aldi, but the spices, if they have access to an Aldi, the spices are much less expensive there than they are at other grocery stores.
I guess some other things for your pantry might be things like a whole fat yogurt, which might replace mayo in a lot of dishes. It could be used as a dessert, could be used to create a cream soup, could be used to have with berries. So a whole fat, unflavored yogurt would be a great thing to have. And it seems like it keeps a good amount of time. Doesn't go bad in a couple of days. We also talk about, now that it's winter, I've been talking about the winter vegetables like cabbage and kale, carrots, the root vegetables. They will last longer in your fridge. And so again, if you're trying to build a winter pantry, but still want your vegetables, and going with frozen or some of the hardier vegetables that are in season makes more sense.
Eating seasonal is important for our bodies, but it's also going to be less expensive and more timely.
When you talk about pantries, though, I have a lot of patients that have a really big block on buying fresh fruits and vegetables because they get bad. I try to talk to them about eating them now, but making sure they know about frozen and canned, because a lot of people really think that stuff is far worse than fresh. It's a negative thing to do. So having that pantry and the freezer stocked is also the alternative. I'm worried about that.
Absolutely. And everything is, when you look at frozen and canned vegetables, they're canned and frozen at the peak of their ripeness. So they're actually preserved at the best point in time.
I have a lot of patients actually sigh of relief when I talk about that, because they really feel like we are fresh. I'd love for them to have size. That's what we use. But we still frozen sometimes. But canned are wonderful. And they also have food pantries to have at least canned.
Yes.
All right.
One
Well,
more
I
good.
think, okay, go ahead. And then we'll
Hey.
kind of wrap it up. Yep.
Yeah, I just thought of this just because I was listening to a podcast the other day about the intersection of food insecurity and special diet needs. So one of the things we need to think about too is resources for less expensive items for our folks who need things, but when folks who have like celiac disease who need things gluten-free or other disorders. And that's something I'm trying to work on, is kind of a list of where can you buy these things at a local place that's cheaper. So it's just something to think about in the new year, is trying to work those folks into our thoughts as well.
Good point. The food pantry told us that if we couldn't come up with how to make a pizza crust with canned green beans or corn, that we would be in Fat City. Because they have tons of beans and corn.
Yes, I think that they are right about that.
Can you think of something else to do with these two things?
All right, Dr. C, I think we're going to wrap it up because we're getting close to the end of the hour, but I wanted to thank you so much for walking with us today and motivating everybody else out there and being a leader as a physician for people to get out and be active on a Saturday morning, starting off our new year 2022, right? And I want to thank my team for joining us too. Michael, Taylor, Ashley, Parag, Meg, Lauren, they're all here. And Taylor posted a survey link in the chat. If you guys wouldn't mind opening it up and giving us some feedback about our walk today, what you liked, what you didn't like, how responsive you were, and any new ideas you have for the new year. We have a great series of walks scheduled every 2 weeks. And as people are filling out that survey, Dr. C, I just wanted to ask you, what's something you're looking forward to in the new year?
I am looking forward to creating a little more spare time to enjoy my grandchildren. Trying to shut my computer off, trying to get my work done by Friday so I have a little time. I used to use Sunday as my catch-up day, but I really need to leave Sunday open to spend time with the kids. So that is certainly one of the things I'm looking forward to, getting a little more discipline with not working at home all weekend.
I think that's awesome. It's a really good, wholesome goal for the new year, just spending more time and cherishing more time with family, friends, and loved ones. So thank you again so much for talking with us and motivating us, educating us on SMART goals and helping us to build a better pantry. Any final words on your talk today? Take home points?
I would say the best thing is be nice to ourselves. Talk to ourselves as if we're talking to our best friend. And I use that example all the time for the patients. Don't be harsh on yourself. Just pick yourself back up. right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really awesome. So we're going to post the recipes and handouts to our Facebook page. If you know anybody else who could benefit from listening to our walk today, we're going to post it on our YouTube channel along with a bunch of other walks that we've already had in previous years. So you can direct them to that, encourage them to go out and take a walk just like you did this morning. And one last thing, if you wouldn't mind opening up the chat and typing who you are and where you're walking from. We just want to see how far our program is reaching in the new year. So who you are and where you're walking from, we'd love to know you and recognize your name and welcome you when you join our walks in the future. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Stay warm and have a great Saturday.